Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. ASK is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. Always seek knowledge in what we do every day. Always seek knowledge in yourself. Understand more about yourself. Understand more about others and those around you. Understand more about life. Ask questions. If you don't know something, ask. Now, more than ever, there is so many ways to learn about things, not just on this channel, but everywhere. Don't be afraid to ask. Seek knowledge about something and learn it and understand it. And quite frankly, what I have found that's helped me in my life is by always seeking knowledge, whether it was something I planned to do for the rest of my life or just to understand how it worked. I found that made me slightly a little better than maybe someone else in a room that I was with or in a room of people, because it gave me the ability to talk about something that wasn't necessarily what I was about. And I think that makes you an even more well rounded individual if you can speak about more than, well, what you're actually doing, what you're actually about. That segues us into this episode, magnetic messaging. In business, you need to say it so that your clients will lean in. Let's get on with today's episode, magnetic messaging. Hi, I'm Adam, and welcome to Ask Adam Live. In this episode, magnetic messaging, say it so your clients lean in. See, clarity attracts, confusion repels. If people aren't leaning in, it's not your value. Quite frankly, it's your message. You know you're capable. You know you can deliver results. But your prospects are hesitating. And I know you're asking yourself, why? Why is this happening? Why can't they see that I'm capable, that I've delivered results? Because people don't buy capability. They buy clarity. They buy what they can understand. Let me share with you, in my experience, specifically in sales. In real estate, I conveyed a very clear message, what I could do, how I would do it, and when it would get done. I even set goals in front of the client for myself. I was upfront with them to say, let's take this listing for 90 days. Because quite frankly, if I can't sell your home marketed and priced right, as you strategically have agreed to do with me tonight, then I don't think your house can get sold. And let me tell you, when they heard the clarity of what I was willing to put up with all of my experience, expertise, energy, marketing dollars for, say, 90 days, sometimes 6 months, depending on the property or the time of the market. But I was pretty strategic in sharing with them exactly what it was I could do, the clarity by which I was going to do it, and the finality of when it was going to get done. They appreciated that. And in fact, when I meet or beat my own expectations, well, not only was I partying and patting myself on the back and congratulations, but I was getting huge language from my client. to say you really did what you said you were going to do. And nobody else said that to us. They told us they could, they told us they would, but they wouldn't tell us when. And for certain clients that I dealt with, time was pretty important. Like they needed to know. And they wanted to be able to make a commitment to sell a home and purchase a home. I found that clarity worked. However, clarity when I was selling insurance, well, I could tell them what they were getting, but there was a lot of unknowns. Like, would you qualify? Because I could tell you about a policy that you could get, but you had to qualify for. It was more of a wait and see. And I really wasn't good with the wait and see approach. I was clear and concise and knew what I could do. Now, granted, there were some policies out there that were pretty cut and dry, and I could have gotten anybody anything for a certain dollar amount. But it also wasn't what you wanted, it was just what you could get. And I don't know about you, but nobody likes to hear, well, see what I can get. They want the velvet rope treatment. They want to get what nobody else has. They want that option they can brag to their friends that they got that nobody else was offered. They want that special thing. And to not be able to be clear, concise, and guarantee, hey, what we're sharing today, I can guarantee you tomorrow, sign here and let me get started. Those were the reassurances I pulled through every single time with my clients in real estate, not so much with insurance. So I just want to share with you that there are two different differences. And I think some of my straightforward approach and personality probably wasn't the best in the insurance world because I'm just not laid back. I'm not a, hey, maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. Let's give it a try. Let's see if it works. I'm not that kind of person. If I tell you you can get something and I personally commit that I can do it for you, I'm going to get it done. The problem is some of that industry is, well, it's a bit top heavy. There's a lot of people that can decide whether or not you get something, not necessarily that you can afford something. Refining frameworks, tightening language, simplifying what you do, when messaging sharpens up the conversations and creates a shift. Just as I've explained, and I'll promise you today, I'll give you a 5-part magnetic messaging framework to make your communication clear, compelling, and conversation ready. How about you? I'm ready to get started. Let's look at part 1, why messaging fails. Here's some common mistakes. Talking about yourself too much. The client wants to know what you can do. Really don't care about you. Remember, you're just kind of a moving part in the whole equation. You're just a number that either is a plus or a minus, a fraction or a decimal. You're just somewhere in the middle. And they just want to know, how does it apply? How's it going to work? And when's it going to happen? Also, using abstract language. You know, I sat down with my financial advisor, or one of them, I should say. I have 3, not to brag. But I remember one of them sat down and was talking about the this and the that and acronyms and stuff. And I was really having trouble keeping along. Ironically, Bob is his name. And Bob was pretty much, what do you want to do? I would like to be able to do this, and I would like for it to look like this at the end. Bob says, you can do it. I will set it up and make sure that's what it looks like and keep you posted as you do what you said you're going to do. and how you're achieving and approaching the goal that you want. No fancy acronyms, no funny language, no gonna put the this with the that, and we're gonna wrap it up with this. And if we can commingle it with this and do a little of that, and we'll halfway through change it and pivot to this. And I honestly didn't care. I know what I can do. I know what I want it to look like. And that's exactly the way Bob presented it to me when it was his turn to speak. So using the abstract language and trying to demonstrate to a client that you know your business with words and acronyms that are relevant to that business, to those people in the circle of that business, you're kind of losing them. Another fail is that you're leading with the features instead of the outcomes. Because quite frankly, nobody cares about the details. They just want to know what it looks like at the end. What do they have to do? And what does it look like at the end? Just like with Bob. Here's my commitment. Is it going to look like this at the end? What do I need to do, or what you can do, or what your company can do to make that happen? Right? So my commitment with his aggressive settings gives me the outcome that I need for this particular account. You know, another thing is trying to impress instead of connect. You know, many times, and I always loved this feature, it really, I don't know, it didn't seem to resonate with insurance. And again, it just wasn't a fit. I know I don't like that term because it's confusing, but I don't just, it didn't jive. But with real estate, I remember I'd come in with my listing book and I had a beautiful presentation. I could do it digitally or I could do it on paper. We didn't have an internet connection or power accessibility or whatever the situation was. Some people weren't comfortable if you flipped open a laptop and started scrolling through the screen. Some people actually wanted to feel and touch the cardboard brochures because they were very impressive with the glossy colors of rooms and the colorful language about what the rooms featured. And people love that stuff. But before I gave him any of that, before I gave him the digital or the paper presentation, I wouldn't even take any of that out of my case. My case sat on the floor next to the chair. I sat at their kitchen table. They'd usually offer me a glass of water. And I would simply sit back in the chair, cross my leg or naturally fold it, or maybe hands just politely placed in my lap and just start asking questions. How was your day? Now, I must share with you, I'm pretty good at keeping notes mentally. I never wrote anything down. I mean, I did eventually, but I just wanted to get to know them. How was your day? How was the trip? They were traveling to get to where we were going to meet. You know, how was your trip? Did you stop along the way? Did you happen to see something? Are you staying for the weekend or heading back home later after our meeting? Oh, since you're sticking around, maybe try this restaurant. It's a great place to eat. Are you spending the night? Which hotel are you at? What do you enjoy to do? What did you enjoy doing here at the cabin or at your home? It was the second home, which most of my clients were. Just asking personal questions. See, I was connecting. I wasn't trying to impress them with anything I had. I was trying to connect to them one on one. And part of that, let's just say, was understanding their language. Because once I understood their language, how they talk, I understood a little bit more about what they would hear. So when I talked to them more personally about the outcomes of the transaction, I knew they were more in tune. Or if they were a business minded person, and I talked about facts and figures and ratios and times and the amount of this and that that would occur and the statistics and the marketing and all of the stuff that has to do with the sale of a house. If they were analytical, I understood that. And I gave them the language they understood. So it was kind of a double sided connection. I wasn't trying to impress them with everything I've done or what my last sale was or how great the market is and how easy it's going to be to sell your wonderful home. No, I was connecting with them because I knew once I made that connection with them, well, the rest of it was just the presentation. And if I understood from the connection what parts were important, they didn't get the whole buffet. They got a couple of things. What was important to them? The top 5 things that they were most concerned about was usually my follow up after connection. So after that connection was, what are the 5 most important things? And once they told you, you pretty much knew. And I'd thumb through my listing book and presentation, say, well, so brochures are important to be at the home. Well, here's the brochure we're going to, okay, so numbers, what you're walking away from, that's important to you. Here's a rough draft of what things could look like. Do you like that number? Does that satisfy you? Would you want to change it? Why do you want to change it? What are you willing to do to change that number? Because most of the time, changing that number meant you were going to have to spend some money and improve your home that you're looking to sell. But again, I connected with them, so I knew how to speak the language in return to them exactly what I knew they were going to hear. I also found that being vague to sound smart, that didn't work either. Because that vagueness usually gave them a shovel to dig deeper and they wanted to know. And then you found yourself more in a situation where you'd have to explain this half a sentence you threw on the table that they didn't quite understand. The rule of thumb is if a 12-year-old can't understand what you do, well, your market won't either. Magnetic messaging is simple, specific, and quite frankly, outcome driven. I'm going to be selfish and tell you it is about the outcome. And quite frankly, if you're in business, it's about the outcome. So let's get into the 5-part magnetic messaging framework, shall we? First of all, you want to define the pain clearly. People move away from pain before they move towards potential. Remember, like I said, I got to connect with my client, and then I asked them, why are they selling? Well, usually it was a soft answer. Then I would get emotional and say, boy, then I guess you're going to miss the place. Well, not really. No, it's maintenance. It was money. We replaced everything in the house. I said, okay, so now you're giving the next person a problem-free house. Well, that's equity you might not realize, but it's good for a quick sale. See how that works? But it was connecting with them to understand exactly what it was that they were looking for and understanding that they would move away from the pain before they move towards potential. For instance, in my coaching business, instead of saying I help professionals grow, I say I help professionals who feel stuck in their mid career rediscover direction and build momentum in 90 days. See, honing in on that specific pain, well, that creates resonance because somewhere in that sentence you connect it. Let me repeat it. I help professionals who feel stuck in mid career rediscover direction and build momentum in 90 days. That's specific to whom I work with, professionals, how they feel. I already know where they're at and that they feel a certain way. And I know how to get them out of that by rediscovering direction and help them build momentum. And I also put that proverbial line in the sand with the commitment that I'm putting my money where my mouth is that I can do something that I'm saying I can do. See, by creating all of that encompassed in one statement, quite clear, most everyone can resonate with that statement, can agree with that statement, can find some point of truth in that statement. You can apply that statement to almost any profession, thing that you do. Instead of just saying, I help financial people grow, I help financial people build their portfolio, I help um, franchisees build their franchise business. No, you help professionals who are looking to expand their business in multiple fields during their mid company development to help them discover a new direction and create momentum. Now, if you want to commit to the 90 days, that's up to you. You got to be pretty confident about that. But you got to define the pain clearly. Because once people see the pain, hear the pain, and recognize the pain, they're more apt to act. Like insurance. People always had the need for it, especially after they understood what it was all about and how it could benefit them. They they immediately wanted the need, whether it was a family member or something that realized life was better with that than without it. Well, then they wanted it. But it's how do you get it? And many times, the pain that I recognized, every single one of them was, can you part with a couple dollars a month? Man, Adam, I don't know. My budget's kind of tight. I said, well, this isn't the benefit for you because you gotta give something up. It just doesn't happen magically. It's not going to be gifted to you. It's not going to be given to you. It's something you invest in. That's what this is. It's an investment. Is quite frankly what insurance is an investment. And if you're not committed to it, and commitment, not necessarily that financial commitment on the monthly basis, which that was the first hurdle. Well, the other hurdle was you had to be in good health. You had to be in decent condition. You couldn't be taking a lot of medications. You couldn't be overweight. You couldn't, you just couldn't have some of the, dare I say, silly things an unhealthy person has. You wouldn't qualify. So even those that had the money all of a sudden couldn't qualify based on the health. And those who were young and healthy didn't want to part with the money. See how there was a give and take? And I always went right to the pain point. And quite frankly, once they realized that, oh, you mean my health makes it expensive? Okay, I guess I don't want it. But I think I was doing both of us a favor because I wasn't giving you a policy you weren't going to follow through on, and you weren't committing to something that, well, you weren't fully into committing to. I digress. You have to clarify the transformation. Back to the coaching. Before, people were overwhelmed, reactive, and scattered. But after that 60 to 90-day program, they were clear, confident, and decisive. See how the messaging paints a contrast, one versus the other? And ask what changes for them. What is it? What is it that you want? What is the outcome you would like to see? Because a lot of that is what is the specialization and the catering per individual that also guarantees the results. One of my famous questions that I always asked is, well, okay, I understand this is what you want to do. How committed are you to this change in your life? Well, if it could just kind of get me over this little slump I'm in right now, you know what? I'm probably not interested because this is longevity. And so many of my clients are long term. Not to say that we're long term in the commitment, but I want to be able to follow up with you in 3, 5, and 10 years to know that you're not only continuing what's been the foundation that's been put in place, but that you've built something even bigger and better on top of it than we ever planned. And that was based on the foundation set. The foundations, which are part of each and every one of these episodes. So if you've missed one, certainly go back and listen to some of the others. But each one of these episodes has these golden nuggets of bricks that help you build not only yourself, but a business. So clarify the transformation. What's it going to look like? What are the changes for your client if they subscribe to your service or to your product? Is your product going to change their life? Is the service you provide going to make something better? Clarify the transformation. Again, going back to that previous question, what's their pain point? Say you provide housekeeping, lawn care services. What's their pain point? I just don't have time to clean the house. Great. So if we could provide a weekly scheduled event to come in, tidy up your house, that would eliminate some pain in your life. Well, certainly. And you'd be willing to compensate us for taking that pain away. Oh, absolutely. Whatever the cost, just get this hectic thing out of my life. Well, I'm not saying you have to gouge them on price, but at least you know they're going to pay anything to not have to clean their own house. And again, not to gouge them in price, but if you are in the cleaning business, maybe you could provide other additional services. Find out what else is painful in their life. Because if they don't like cleaning, tidying up their own home, well, maybe they don't like grocery shopping. And maybe you could segue into that service as well. Hey, if you can provide me a list of all the regular things that you enjoy throughout the week, I will make sure that after we clean, we will ensure that all of those things are in your fridge and the cupboard exactly where you would like them for an additional fee. So you're not gouging, you're providing an additional service. That's why it's important to ask those questions and find out where the pain points are, because there's more than one. If one thing bothers you, I guarantee there's many. So dig in and find the pain points. And maybe this is something that you don't want to get into as a service yourself, but I'm almost certain that you know someone in your life or in your network that is eagerly looking for something additional to do in their life and a business that they might be interested in starting, that you could say, hey, I think I have your first client. I'm not really into grocery shopping. You seem to enjoy shopping. Would you mind going shopping for this person? They'd pay a fee and be very appreciative. Can you commit to a weekly shopping trip? You never know. That may be starting the next entrepreneur on their business because you found some pain points. Number 3, use concrete language. See, just being abstract to say, well, I'm here to help you optimize your potential. Well, as a dynamic life strategist, that's not really what I do. I don't help you optimize your potential. However, what I do is replace scattered days with a structured 60-minute clarity system. See, this concrete language increases trust already because you're like, oh, I am a little scattered and I've tried to multitask and it doesn't work. But if I only give 60 minutes a day to a clarity system, my life could improve. I would be more organized. Where do I sign up? I understand that completely. I know what it'll replace. I know how long it takes to do the strategy system. And I know what the results will be if I do that. Well, of course you can commit because it's clear and understandable language. And that creates trust with your client. And that's really the first thing you want to do is create that trust. right? Just like you want to connect with them, you also want to build that trust. Simplify the framework. See, people lean in when they see structure. So if you have, like in with real estate, I had a step-by-step process. I know there was about 186 things that I did per client if you added up from the day we engaged to the day we completed and then some. Like after the sale, there was the follow through. There was like 186 things all in total that got done through like a 90-day period, if you will, or 6-month period. 90 days was pretty pressed, so I wouldn't say all of those, but if a contract went for about 6 months, I can guarantee you we exhausted all 186 of the services that I provided. I can't specifically say I did because I had a marketing team and I had a listing team and I had a buyer's agent team and just had all of this spread out. So it wasn't just solely me, but it was the services that I could offer to you. But I did have 13 things that I did every single time. It was the structured plan of here's what we're doing. Here's what here's what we're doing connected with you. We're sitting down to do listing papers. See, we're already in the list. And they were like, yeah, we're in the list. They could see that we were already making progress through this checklist. And then when this happens, I'm going to let you know. And when this happens, I'm going to let you know. When we get here, I'm going to let you know. And they could see each one of those steps. And I know in much of my communication, I'd say, well, here we are. We're at step number 5. So they knew they were not quite halfway through. But in my communication, as we got through 6 and 7, it was like, oh, we're starting. Yeah, just want to let you know we're halfway through the process. We're getting through this. Whether it was numbers or words, they still resonated with 7, half of 13. We're better than halfway. See how that makes sense? But by spelling that out at the beginning with my clients and letting them know, hey, here's the 13-part system that we're going to go through. We're going to do this, 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 and this. Seeing that structured plan, they knew where they were at. They knew where they stood. They knew things that we both had to do to get through these steps. And they knew that eventually there was a completion. Now, still speaking of real estate, how confident do you think a client might be if I sat down and said, well, we're going to do the listing today and then I'll let you know where we go from here? Are you going to sign that paper not knowing where we're going to go from here? You want to know what happens after the paper gets signed. And then after that and after that. So you want to have a structure. For instance, with coaching, there's the 4-step method. There's the 90-day reset. As you notice in the podcast, there's 5-part formulas or 3-part formulas. I also work with clients and set up those 3 daily anchors. See, by doing this, you're starting to set up structure. And by having these defined structures, well, in the mind, that signals safety. See, the human body likes repetition. They also like to know what's happening next, right? How many times have you traveled? On a bus, on a train, on a plane? You look at the departure time. And then you look at your smartphone device, watch, look at the clock on the wall. You know that the departure time and the clock on the wall coincide with when it will be time to go. And when you get on a plane or a train or something, and the conductor or the captain or someone gets on and says, welcome aboard, we're going from here to here. We expect to be there at such and such a time as planned, or we're ahead of schedule, behind schedule. We're going to make up some time in the air. Well, this does this not create some level of safety in your mind, some security in your mind to know that There's an understanding that we're late, but we're going to be on time or early. And so you're not the only one concerned, and that it's shared publicly. So now everyone's concerned, or their concern diminishes because now we're in the safe zone of understanding and we have safety and security and understanding. So when, again, people lean in when they see structure, and that structure, well, naturally just creates safety in the mind. And that's how people are going to lean in to you, the salesperson, the marketing person, is when they see that there's structure, that you have a 4-step method, 10-step method. We're going to reconvene in 30 days and see how things are going, or we reconvene in 15 days. Hey, we're just going to send you a short survey in like 10 days just to ask how you're feeling about our transaction so far. Are we doing what we promised? What more would you like to see? Secretively, some of this is also great marketing techniques, is when you do those mid transaction surveys, you start to understand a little bit of what your client's thinking. And then you take some notes and put that back into your presentation. Because if one person is thinking about it, many people are thinking about it. And then you put in your presentation. Now, I know you're going to be about 15 or 20 days into our agreement, and you're starting to ask yourself, man, I'm not really sure. I'm feeling like Adam's not pulling through. What would you need to see to let you know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing? Man, if you could give me some marketing statistics, maybe some showing feedback, could you let me know what others are saying about the home? That would certainly be great. As soon as I asked that, the first thing I did was I ran back to my computer back in the infancy of the internet and found the first company that provided some level of non-bias, because I didn't want it to go through me. I wanted a third party who I could set up that would send them something that the third party had it, so that it was definitive. And that way it wasn't touched by me. It was from someone else, like the for instance, the buyer's agent had to log in, or the buyer's agent sent it to the buyer and the buyer would fill it out. The buyer would have to authorize that the buyer's agent was allowed to fill this out based on buyer comments, that it wasn't just an agent filling it out, giving their, how do I want to say this correctly, irrational opinion biased on the fact that they might not have gotten the listing. Now, I like I say, I want to be cautious about that, because agents, realtors or not, should follow that level of business ethics. But I digress. Not going to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, like I said, it was a third party system that was separated just far enough that I know it wasn't me and it wasn't an unhappy agent. It was truly buyer's comments. And man, I can't tell you the justification of, hey, you probably should change the carpet. And it even gave you statistics, a summary of statistics. So you'd get 5, 10, 15 together. You could see the summary. Most common answer given, why they weren't happy with the house, felt like the carpet was a burden they didn't want to deal with. Hey, what would help our house sell faster? I think you should change the carpet. We really don't want to do that. Well, pretty soon, after about 5, 10, 15 comments of, well, we didn't want to take on the carpeting burden, they were asking me who the local carpeting person was to get carpeting put in the home to help it sell. That gave me street cred. I was all about that system. But again, I was asking midstream what it was that, what you would want. Anyway, I digress. I didn't mean to go down the rabbit hole with that, but you ask those questions to your clients midstream, take those notes, and then that becomes part of your presentation of leaning in, already answer the question they're going to have. They're going to have them. And you want to give them that structure already, whether they think they need it or not, it's already there. You give them your 5-part formula. You let them know that we're going to reconvene in 30 days. If things haven't happened, we're going to look over our statistics and our summaries and see maybe we're priced too high. Again, these are all things that you can almost squash the price increase from day one because they don't want to be in a position of finding out from someone else that you were right. Again, you got to know your business, but that's my experience. And by having those structures in place, people checked off safety every single day, felt secure. Oh, you're going to do that? I feel good. You could do that too? That's wonderful. I feel like I'm in my mother's arms. This is the best feeling. And when you can do that above and beyond what your competition is doing, well, then you're going to get that transaction each and every time, no matter what. I I did. I know you will. Number 5, you got to speak with certainty. And I know if you're just starting out with something that might not be easy because, well, you're not so clear. I can share with you at the beginning of my coaching business, at the beginning of my real estate business, and well, the beginning of insurance. Speaking with certainty was kind of tough because I didn't have the experience to speak from. So I will share with you this, and I don't believe the fake it till you make it. I do believe in learning and understanding someone else's stories because when you tell someone else's story, well, you're not making anything up and you're not lying, but you can speak from experience. So go to those office meetings and network with those agents and talk to those fellow agents and say, hey, be available at the office and talk with them and say, hey, how'd the home inspection go? Oh, it was great. We had a couple of issues. Oh, well, how would you approach that with your client? How that, boy, a whole new roof, that's going to be tough sell. Well, no, I'm simply going to explain to them that the house is this old, the roof is this old, and well, it's kind of a safety slash neglect thing. And well, you got the lifespan of the roof, and now you're selling the house to someone else that equally would like similar lifespan to the roof. So it's kind of a handoff commitment that, well, for safety reasons, you probably want to get rid of the potential leaky roof and you want to hand off something to someone that, well, is going to last a little bit for them if you're going to justify the price. Now, if you're willing to lower the price for the cost of the roof, and then the buyer's getting an extra used roof, if I should say. Well, you just learned about roofs. So when you sit down with your client as you're new and they go, wow, I don't know that house had a roof. Well, one of the strategies that I understand we can use, we could request that the seller place a roof prior to closing and or reduce the price equal or more than the amount of the roof, because now you're going to have to take over and fix the roof that they neglected to do so. Well, you just sound like you've been there before, right? So that's where networking and talking with other agents, not to necessarily solve the problem, but to understand how to handle it. You then get to speak from their experience from your mouth, and that builds confidence. You say that a couple of times, and then you have your own experience to dovetail into it. Well, now it's double confidence. I can feel your confidence already. But what you need to do is speak with certainty. And that's removing phrases like I think, maybe, and kind of, and replace those with here's how. This works because this will help you. See how the confidence transfers when you use that language versus maybe we could try? I think that's a good idea. Let's see if it works. Let's see if they will do a roof. Well, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear, I know what will help you. If we strategize our purchase price for the price of the roof, then you're going to finance the roof, but you get the house at a discount. Or this works because the seller's going to fix the roof prior to closing, which means you get a new roof, and they're getting asking price for the home, but they're going to have to pay for a roof. So see how you get a roof at extra cost from the seller because they failed to, well, provide a newer roof prior to selling the home. See how that feels more like a win? And you speak with certainty. When you say that, man, I'll buy a house from you. Absolutely. You're going to go to the table with that kind of confidence. Part three, let's get into message testing. You want to test your message. And I recommend having a partner that you can kind of bounce some of these phrases off, especially if you're new. You don't want to go in front of the client the first time and go, that this needs to roll off the tongue. You need to be ready with these responses to emit that level of confidence. So get with that fellow coworker that shared that idea with you and say, you know what? I like that. I appreciate that share. You be a buyer's agent. You be a buyer, and that I'm working with, and say, I'd love to buy the house, but I think it needs a new roof, or the inspection came back and it needs a new roof, and regurgitate that back to the agent and let that fellow agent say, yeah, say this a little stronger, say this a little softer. Say that a couple of times and then practice it. Practice makes perfect practice. But get to where that's natural and it comes out. Because by having that confidence to sort of regurgitate those just right off the cuff is going to help you a lot in really anything. I'm sorry I'm hung up on real estate for this episode, but it seems to work with that. And basically keep it concise. Somebody needs to be able to answer this in about 10 seconds. Like, who's it for? What problem does it solve? What results will you get? And if not, if you can't answer that in like 10 seconds and just like a very quick, tight statement, well, then you got to refine that. You got to sit down and really hone through it. And I know we have some really great advancements with alternative thinking. Utilize some of that to really tighten up your message. And then you want to read it several times and know it so that it comes out verbatim from your mouth. And now it becomes your words, not artificial intelligence. And once you get that tightened up, you also want to tie it to a follow through, right? Remember how I kind of personalized it and said, well, because the seller neglected doing this prior to a sell and knowing that, well, they got a lifetime or the lifespan of the roofing material and now they're expected to get top value for something that now you don't get to enjoy the lifespan of something that's part of the structural integrity of a building. So if they get it for you, that's a win for you, and you get the lifespan of the material for your enjoyment. See how that sounds like a win? But whoever says, no, I don't want that, is somebody that, let me back up. I don't know. I was in the business for quite a bit. So maybe a handful on those rare incidences that I had a client that said, Adam, that sounds great. And man, I'd really love for them to buy a roof, but truth be told, I don't want them to put a cheap roof on my house because I'm going to buy that. And I know they're just going to throw something on there to get it done and pay the bill and meet the obligation. I want a specific kind of roof. So I'm actually appreciative and in favor of the fact that they've let it go this long, that now I'm going to put something that I want at my expense that I know will last for as long as I'm there, if not more. Very few times did I have that sort of rebuttal from my client. And I respected that. I respected it eventually. And I said, you know what? That's probably a better outcome. Now, if you're looking at a mortgage payment and stuff like that, and you're like, man, I really don't want to put a roof on, well, then that's your situation. And there's nothing wrong with either one of them. I'm just saying more people were apt to the seller just putting a roof on than saying, no, I want to put on what I want on that property. So by having that wrap or that tie to that follow up, well, that was confidence on command, right? And that was decision speed. And that's also business scaling because you're bringing it back around with what you do and what it can do, like the results. That is the message that drives momentum. That's the message that makes things happen. That's what's going to scale your business. Let's look at common messaging killers. Might step on a few toes with this one, but I have always been about honesty. It served me well and sometimes not so well. But I will say more times well than not so well. And the common messaging killers is trying to serve everyone. I remember in insurance, my mentor, manager, coach, sort of jack of all trades. Actually, I think it was before the insurance. It was in some multi-level marketing. I was in my 20s, and I remember he was teaching us about sales. It was a workshop, and he pretty much just said, once you understand, some will, some won't, so what? Don't try to serve everybody. Some will, some won't, so what? Move on. Don't get hung up on the fact that somebody didn't want your product. Somebody didn't. Now, again, you fine-tuned your pitch. And if you've got it nailed down and your message is resonating and somebody doesn't subscribe to what you're offering, don't doubt yourself, knowing that you have results, by the way. This will help too, is if you've got some results that you know your offering does what it's supposed to do, is fine-tuned, has the point, everything we've talked about, and they're not interested. So what? You know that your delivery with confidence does attract that certain client, and you know that it works. Take the work. The ones that don't, so what? Not everybody. Don't try to serve everyone, because you can get into the next part of this, which is finding yourself changing your message all the time to appease everyone. Once you get that dialed in, you start getting a few yeses. You stick with that. And don't change it because somebody said no. And don't say, well, okay, let me adjust it this way to take care of you. And then no, you have your structure, and your personal safety and mind comfort is in your structure. Don't adjust it. Don't change it. You serve who you can serve. You stick with it. Don't adjust it. Remember your outcomes. Remember what you can always provide at the end of the day. At the end of the thing, what are the results? Don't lead in with your credentials. Don't lead in with how you're certified and registered and accredited and all that stuff. Uh, Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I I think I got a couple endorsements in real estate, some letters at the end of my name, and it didn't matter. In fact, it was kind of a running joke at the meeting. They're like, what does this mean? I was like, ah, it's funny you should ask. Just some letters I paid for. Each letter's worth about so many dollars. And they're like, really? And I said, well, they taught me a few things, but basically it's nothing we talked about here. And I've learned from basic process of life and conversations what clients want through survey and structure. And that's what I provided you here tonight. So, and it got to the point, even though I had that certification, I didn't have, I think one time I finally just punched out my next stack of business cards with no letters on it. And I would always laugh when I got handed a business card from a fellow agent and just littered with all the letters. And I'm like, why? This is so confusing. Nobody knows half of what those are. And honestly, most people don't care. They just want to know what you can do, what it looks like in the process, and how it's going to finish, and when you're going to finish. That's all they want to know. And those letters behind your name weren't going to tell them any of that for sure. I'm almost certain. I mean, the training was good, don't get me wrong. And I actually utilized that training that I passed on to my agents to help them out because, when you're starting out, you're a little financially tied. Nobody has the time or money to go to a weekend retreat to get some letters behind their name. But some of the honed in strategies that I utilized had proven results. I could give you on a weekly basis and within a month during regular meeting time, have you dialed into some of these really good things. Plus, it had proven results and you were using company letterhead. So it was already something you were doing, something that was already available to you as an agent of mine through my office. So lead in with outcomes, not with your credentials. Here's This probably should be number one in the countdown, and that's over explaining. I know I might do that sometimes on this podcast, but some of that's just my passion as well as I don't know who I'm speaking to. The audience is so vast. If there was somebody across the desk from me, and again we connected, and I knew who I was talking to, well, there wouldn't be the diversion of explanation in different facets. It would be pretty clear what we're talking about and how I would tell you about it. So, but the big killer is over explaining. If you can't say it in a short sentence, I'll give you two. But once you get past two sentences, you kind of lost somebody. One is really the home run. That's where you need to be. If you have two sentences, well, you're a base hit, and that still doesn't get you to home. Another thing is avoiding direct language. You got to be honest with the people that you're dealing with, and you got to be upfront. And if it's something, I guess even same handful of clients that I think I sat across from a table, and um, I know once or twice it was just a total impasse. They wanted something, I sort of provided it, but I wasn't excited about it. I knew it wasn't worthwhile to provide it, but they were pretty adamant that it was provided. I'm really being vague here, just to protect the innocent, but I just said, maybe I'm not your guy. Maybe I just not the person to sell your house. And I apologize. I appreciate your time. I started packing up my things and I left. And I did that because I was pretty direct that it wasn't something I didn't do. I didn't find it effective, and I wasn't going to step outside my structure to do something I know wasn't effective just to appease somebody in appeasing them, I guess. And I realize it's about customer service, but I had all the facts on my side of the table that said it was going to be a huge waste of time, and I'm just not into doing that. If I can avoid any loss in my business, I'm going to do it. I'm sorry. That's my call as a business person. And it's a commitment, that you're going to make to someone. And when I put my name on that listing document, I committed to that contract of providing a service and services which I said I would provide. But I'm not going to do anything outside of that provision necessarily to appease. And once or twice, it was just the plain simple price. Hey, your property's overpriced. I'm not going to be able to sell that. Well, we think we can. I'm like, well, if you think you can, go ahead. And if you think somebody else in this county can help, so be it. In fact, and I remember being prepared. Maybe that was another episode. But anyway, be prepared. I always had a list of 6 people, the top 6 people. Quite frankly, the top 3, they were friends of mine anyway. So, you know, I, I was actually giving them a referral, non-referral. And we often talked about it later. Hey, you remember the Smiths? Not the Smiths, but keeping it vague. Hey, you remember the Smiths? Yeah, well, the price thing. They were pretty hung up on the price, and I just couldn't see it. So I gave them my referral paper. Oh, yeah, we were about 8 months on the market with that. They were pretty adamant about that price. I said, yeah, same thing with me. Now, see, I missed 8 months of marketing for something that was overpriced, but I knew that. And again, I wasn't dissing my friend. I was giving them business. They want to sit on something for 8 months, so be it. That's up to them to say no. I knew I was going to say no, and I did them a favor by getting them a sale. And quite frankly, maybe it was a blessing they needed at 8 months. It was a hassle I didn't want ever. But you see how I was prepared that even if we didn't agree, I said, you know what? Here's 6 people I'd recommend. I'm sorry we didn't come to a agreement this evening. I appreciate that we were able to sit down and have a conversation. Things that you've shared with me, personal and whatnot, obviously are confidential. I can't share that with anyone unless we engage in a new agreement, in which case, with your permission, I can then share. So I do hope you enjoy the rest of your evening or day. And I packed up my things and I left. And sure as anything, one of those 6 people got the listing. They always did. Because maybe I shared, maybe it was on their short list. I don't know. But I learned how to say no. And what I found was that clarity was actually kindness. I was being kind to myself and I was doing them a favor because I'm a nice guy. But if I'm doing something that I don't like to do, then I'm not a nice guy. Does that make sense? If I'm doing something that goes against my structure, well, I'm not going to be a happy person doing it. And I know that, which is why I said no professionally. I said no. And did you notice how professionally I actually gave them options? I'm like, hey, I'm sorry we didn't connect, but here's the top 6 people I recommend that you could speak with about listing your property for sale. And I'm sure that at least I knew the top 3 were people that kind of did a few things like I did, but not to the measurement that I did. So I knew they were kind of getting the same thing. Again, it was just, I already saw the writing on the wall and I didn't want to commit to it. So again, how you present yourself, don't do it vaguely. You want to do it specifically. As I mentioned earlier, the weak conversation is, I help people sell their house. Speaking of real estate, the magnetic conversation is I help driven buyers and sellers who are looking for a professional agent to provide strategic, aligned marketing strategy to effectively and efficiently sell their home for the highest market value with the least amount of hassle. Is that what you want? Highest market value with the least hassle? I'm your guy. Sign here. And as my one of my coaches, Floyd, he'd say, well, this was back in the 80s that he did sales. He's like, press hard, making 5 copies when they had the carbon papers that you had to push through. Press hard, make 5 copies. So be clear, specific, and outcome driven. See, when your message is clear, your market responds. Say it simply, say it boldly, and let them lean in. Because once they've leaned in, you know they're interested to work with you. In sales, business, and life, let us all go out and make it a great day.